Hello and welcome. I am your host of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Author Karen E. Osborne. I have five novels out. The latest is Justice for Emerson. I am so glad that you're here. This is a space for readers and writers to come together and talk about books. So today I get to meet somebody that I've not met before. I know lots of times when I'm talking to you guys, I'm introducing you to people that I know, people that I know their work. But today I get to meet somebody who's I'm very intrigued with, and he writes under D.I. Jolly. But his name is David, and I'm going to call him David. Is that all right?
Absolutely fine.
Okay, good, good, good. And welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. So I
Thank you.
thought
It's,
we
it's
would.
cool to be here.
Isn't that cool? Yeah, these are fun, right? I
Yeah,
love being interviewed as well. It's like a little nerve-wracking, but in general, it's a good thing.
yeah.
So let's start this conversation with you telling our audience a little bit about your writing journey. Like, were you born with a pen? How did it all come about?
I I was about 8 years old, and my parents had just bought a computer. This was when was I eight? 32 years ago. And the computers I bought from a friend, and it came with a video game on it called Gabriel Knight Sins of the Father. And Gabriel Knight was an author, and I decided at 8 years old that he was the coolest person I'd ever encountered. And I wanted to be him when I grew up, including being a writer, wearing a trench coat, which in the east coast of South Africa is a bit like wearing a trench coat in the south of the United States. Not a great idea. And I was going to move to New Orleans and make my life as a writer. I have a trench coat and I am a writer, and I've been to New Orleans. But
Wonderful. 8 years old. That is terrific and inspired by a video game.
yeah, I decided I wanted that's who I wanted to be, and then that's who I set my sights on growing up to be. So I got into the idea of being a writer before I really knew what that meant or really knew how to read. So it was a bold
Yeah,
choice to make.
a bold choice. And look at you, though. Look at you. So let's talk about blurred lines. Tell us the setting, the premise. Give us some sense of blurred lines.
Well, I've always kind of liked the idea of taking and breaking superpowers. You know, what would it really look like if you had angel wings? Where would you wouldn't be able to fit in any chair. You wouldn't be able to buy clothes off the rack. You wouldn't be able to fit in most showers realistically. You know, kind of like how to break a superpower. And I think I was thinking about how awful it would be to actually be psychic if you couldn't control that power. And then blurred lines kind of happened in my sort of I had that thought and thought about it for a couple of days, and then most of blurred lines sort of arrived fully formed in my head, which was an amazing sort of realization of who the main
The main
characters would
character.
be and where the story was going to go, and sort of that idea of just picking up in somebody's life in the middle of the sort of nightmare existence of somebody trying to not be weird while they can while being constantly overwhelmed by the sound of everybody else's thoughts.
Else's thoughts. So your main character, Miles. So Miles hears multiple conversations all the time. Oh
The
my
cl
goodness, that's
it's sort of proximity based. So the closer he physically is to people, the more he hears. So if he's by himself and he's got some space, it's quiet. But if he's like I based a lot of it on social anxiety, and the idea
hmm.
that you're in a room full of people and they're all looking at you and judging you, and that pressure of there are too many people. I can't be around this many people. Miles knows none of them care about him. No one's thinking about him unless he's being weird. But at that same kind of pressure building as these voices sort of invade his mind.
Yeah. And then he hears something scary, right? He hears something.
Yeah, he hears a voice sort of on a what feels like a different frequency to the one he's used to, someone screaming for help. And he's sort of looking around and he's feeling sick and strange. And he starts looking around and he can't see where it's coming from. And he
Mm.
sort of doubles over and he rushes home and he gets sort of overwhelmed by it and he sort of runs home and hides. And his conscience starts to get on him, going, you might be the only person that knows someone's in trouble. And you're either now at a point where you can choose to do nothing, but up until this point, you've been hiding from yourself, sort of as a reflex. Now you have to make a choice. Are you going to be this person or are you going to be that person?
Wow. That's a great premise. It's set in present day
Present day, there are cell phones and the internet and people working remote and
and all that we enjoy or stress about
or
in
hate,
this
yeah.
time. So let's talk a little bit more about Miles. Um, so we know that he's got this issue. Um, what other characteristics does he have, and what do you like about Miles?
I'm very sympathetic towards Miles because it first kicks in when he's a teenager. And actually, when I wrote the book originally, the first draft started with him when he first gets the power as a teenager. And I
Mm.
wrote it very linearly. And then when it was done, I was like, no, that you need to start with the plot. And then so I took the first sort of third of the book, cut it out, and put it in the middle. But when you meet Miles as a teenager, you realize that he's kind of a funny, chatty kid. Like he's interested in people and he's interesting and he gets along with people. He's not the most popular kid in school, but he's got best friends and he's likes to engage and gets along with the people around him. He's just a normal, sociable, happy kind of kid. A little bit of a struggle when he was younger. Sort of the mystery play in is that he had cancer as a young child, but overcome it through experimental treatment, and maybe that's why he's spontaneously become psychic at 16.
Hmm.
But
My grandmother was she could, she could walk into a room. We used to play games. She'd play games with us, hide the thimble. And you hide the thimble someplace, and then all of us are sitting there thinking, it's under the couch, it's under the couch, And she would just walk in the room and just,
it's under the
no,
couch.
it's under the couch. She
Yeah.
just got got the message.
Nice.
Yeah, so this is a lot for him, a young boy to manage and handle. You said he has friends. Is there someone else in the book? Is there another character that
There,
has a big role?
there are a couple. When he's younger, there's his best friend Gilbert, who is, the person he's most excited to tell. And being teenage boys, the first thing they do is, now you'll be able to talk to the pretty girl in school and you'll know what to say because you can hear what she's thinking. And it's like, genius. This is amazing. This is every young boy's dream. And of course, what he finds out is he doesn't need to read her thoughts. He works out that she likes him as much as he likes her. So that makes that very easy. And then that dynamic sort of continues, and the idea of Liz, the girl, stays with him through some rather traumatic events because it's when it starts when he's around people for a long time, he starts to hear what they're thinking, and if he touches somebody, he hears what they're thinking. But
Mm.
then when he's older, it's everyone, so it gets sort of progressively more powerful. But when he's younger, as teenagers do at a party, he gets intimate with his girlfriend, and that almost kills him because he suddenly gets so invaded that he can't see a distinction between him and his girlfriend. And his mind fractures and sort of wakes up in hospital screaming because you can now hear everyone in the hospital thinking. And the doctor's like, we think he had a bunch of strokes. We have no idea.
Inspired this. You said you always thought about what if, like breaking. superpower, taking superpower. Why this one? Why did something specific inspire?
I loved the idea of you could write an incredibly zoomed in story about one person and get this multifaceted story because he can hear what everyone's thinking. He gets everybody else's story. So the reader gets everybody else's story. And I loved that idea of this person who couldn't control the power suddenly hearing this thing on this level, this frequency of someone is in trouble, what do I do? And how do I wrestle with that? And the whole book takes place over like a week and a half, I think.
Oh, my kind
And
of
it
book.
it doesn't end with and now everything is fine and he's this hero that everybody he it it starts with him where his life is sort of has stood still and ends with him going, I think I'm able to take the next real proper step forward that I've my first real step forward since I was a teenager. Sort of his attempt to really overcome this fear and the sort of the trauma and the PTSD he suffered when his power kicked into overdrive as a teenager.
Yeah. So does that mean there's a sequel coming?
I have no idea. I've had one or two ideas of what to do with Miles since then, but it was an intense book to write because you're so in someone's head, and it like bad things happen, and
Yeah. Well,
he makes
otherwise it
some
wouldn't be
of them slightly
interesting.
worse. Yeah,
All
I
right.
mean,
So did you learn anything about yourself as a result of writing
I
this book,
I
researching?
I learned a lot of things about a lot of things researching this book. I mean, also like basing power on social anxiety. I learned about safety behavior, which sort of organically, like my idea of just Miles's fear, because I almost took Miles to therapy because I had a friend who's a therapist who I would sit down with and be like, can we discuss my character as if it were me? And so I was almost taking Miles through therapy because I also believed someone who'd been through that much had to go to therapy. I also didn't want to demonize therapy as sometimes happens in books. I also didn't want to make it a cure-all, like it's a process. So I wanted to make that very realistic as much as I could, and that ended up with just me sitting talking to a therapist as if I was a psychic 30-year-old suffering massive
Mm,
anxiety all the time. So that was an interesting sort of thing to put yourself
yeah.
through. And yeah, I learned about safety behavior and that idea of when you try and protect yourself so much that you're doing yourself and the people around you harm
Mm,
because you're so afraid to go out, so afraid to do stuff, especially with Miles, that he's isolated himself from the people that want to help him, that want to be part of his life, that understand that there is a problem and could meet him halfway, but he's not even willing to go halfway because he's too terrified of what might happen. And they
mm.
get cut off and he becomes isolated and everyone is losing because you're sort of giving into this need to protect yourself.
I like Miles already. I feel how old is Miles when we in the story?
I think he's about 30 in his 30s.
In his 30s.
Yeah, I think late 20s, early 30s, if I remember correctly.
Well, you have got us all intrigued. This is what are you reading? What are you writing? So, have there been any books that inspired this book, or just any books recently that you read that you can recommend to our audience?
A lot of sort of weird inspiration came from for Blurred Lines in the form of the X-Men comic books and cartoons from the 90s, because they also dealt with, superheroes and superpowers as a problem a lot. And I think that's kind of where it originally started. And the people who can fly aren't praised as heroes. That's, it's all discrimination and allegories for different things. And I think that's kind of where the root of, especially with Blurred Lines, came from. So I took a lot of a lot of inspiration from cartoons, and that your hero doesn't have to be a hero in the classical sense. They just have to be the person trying.
Yes, yes. And have you read anything recently that you can recommend?
I'm currently putting I spent most of last year writing a detective series, so I read a lot of things in that genre, John D. MacDonald's, Travis McGee books, Sherlock Holmes, which I'm reading at the moment, Jim Butcher, who writes the Dresden Files, which is about a wizard detective, which is just fun. Uh, a lot of sort of detective themed stuff still on my reading list.
Yeah, cool, cool. Well, you've got everybody intrigued and everybody interested. So you all know that you can find Blurred Lines on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. You can go to your library, you can go to your independent bookstore. If you don't see it, just ask. But how can they find out more about D.I. Jolly? How can they be in touch with you online?
I'm in a few places as he frantically starts to look up what the IP address, what the web address of that is. I've got a link tree that has all of my things, which is linktree/jolly.davidian. Um, I've got a Patreon at patreon.com/dijolly where I post regular short stories. There's about 300 something short stories there already.
Wow.
Yeah, I started a writing group in Berlin 10 years ago, and I've written 330 something stories for that over the last 10 years. Um, let's see, Instagram, David Ian Jolly, all is one word, and Blue Sky, D.I. Jolly on Blue Sky.
So, and you're talking to us from Germany.
Yes, I live in Berlin.
Live in Berlin. It's a wonderful city. I love Berlin. Been to Germany many times. That's one of our favorite cities. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. And I know that everybody knows the drill. Buy his book, Blurred Lines. Do you have the cover?
Yeah, one second.
Yeah.
Red lines.
Is Blurred Lines. And read it. Write a review. We're so grateful, grateful when you write reviews. And then be in touch with D.I. Jolly, with David Ian Jolly, and tell him that you met him on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Until next week, everybody, have a great, great week. Bye bye.
Bye.